about some of the conversations that's been happening in response to these questions, as we're like discussing, what gives us strength, what are, sorry, like just ate so much, and I also need the question. I'm like, wait, what? We were just talking about them, and I totally forgot them. Okay, can someone remind me? So, what inspires you? Campaigns that inspire you, right? And
What does community safety look
what does community safety look like? All right, cool. We have all three now. So, what does community safety look like? What gives you strength? And what are some campaigns that are inspiring you right now? So, does any table want to start sharing? I think maybe like one person per table can maybe share out, or y'all can work together to give us a little summary. It's okay if yeah.
Let me share.
Okay.
Okay. We'll start over here. Oh yes.
So, campaigns that inspire me is Sheikh Yang's campaign, a Muslim brother that's in Atlanta, and we're giving support. We're giving support to his case. He had basically a crooked attorney who lied and filed false documents and caused him to get removed in absentia. So that's a campaign to bring awareness to what happens in immigration with bad attorneys who extort families and do things of that nature.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to add in?
Campaigns that inspire. We shine.
To be honest, campaigns are just what inspires.
You can respond to any of the questions.
Okay. Yeah. Well, God first of all, but going through the campaign and the struggle with my brother's case, for instance, it developed my faith into holding on to the fact that everything is going to be all right. We're going to get these people out. We're going to get these people established and in the situation they're supposed to be in, because at the end of the day, that's the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just staying focused on that and never never wavering from that knowledge is just like the most important thing, because then now it's opening me up to this spaces like these and meeting people like you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like through our struggles we find our people, right? And we find strength to advocate for what we need, to fight for what we need.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And there's plenty more people that need the help, so we just gotta keep doing it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I saw so many hands go up. I think maybe let's have an open conversation. I feel like everyone is so eager to speak. Let it out. Let's go.
Well, for strength, I said, we discussed that. We said that our faith, is very important for us. And I also added sleep. I need a lot of sleep for strength. But no, joking aside, it's the youth. I've seen many people in organizing spaces, younger people are more interested. At least when I was younger, I was near that.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing so many younger people educating themselves, doing the groundwork. They're not just talking; they're also walking the talk, which is very important. As we all know, right? Posting is easy. Showing up is, that matters the most.
Yeah. For sure.
And in terms of what it looks like, safety in our community, no cops. That's it.
Period. That's right.
I don't want to even go further into details. No cops.
Mm-hmm. I hear that one. Yeah. So the people that are inserted into our community for safety, but really they're for surveillance, and they're for criminalizing us, and they're for separating us from our families and from our loved ones, and from our autonomy, our agency, our movement, right? I think, yeah, it's really important that you state police specifically, right?
We were kind of like talking about how like young Muslim men kind of get into this, police state.
Yeah.
A lot of like Muslim men are, joining NYPD, joining the military, despite our history within NYPD and with the U.S. military, it's very concerning, right? Like, we need to come up with plans and programs where we can, save these youth, right? Like once they get in, they're part of it, and they don't want to give up because there's a reward for that, and I would be interested if anyone knows, any community work that works with young Muslim men, so that their consciousness is alive,
For
and
sure.
not getting drawn into something darker and brutal.
Yeah.
I'm interested in a day-to-day basis. What could be a good alternative, a positive one for safety if there are no cops? Let's say imagine no cops overnight. What could be a good day-to-day safety alternative?
So what would day-to-day, that's a great question, what would day-to-day safety acts look like in the absence of police?
On a day-to-day.
Go ahead.
I think that like we keep ourselves safe, building community, literally making sure you pay attention to your neighbor, pay attention to what they're doing, check up on them. Make sure like your neighbor's kids are your kids. And then like growing up Arab, I grew up in a very Arab neighborhood. Everybody knew whose kid was who.
Yeah.
And only when that community started to break up, that's when you started to see like the drug abuse rise. That's when you started to see a lot of these youth committing some crimes that like they want to like you can't blame them. You know what I mean? When you don't have that community, when you start losing community, that's when like you lose a lot of kids, right? And you lose a lot of people. So I think us keeping ourselves safe, making sure that like your neighbor's doing good, and looking after each other. I think that's like the best one of that's like the best alternative to cops. But,
Yeah, it sounds like communicating and building conversations, right? And sharing what your needs are with your direct community is a huge part of it. I know that like sometimes, for some of us the experience might be that we don't even know our neighbors. We don't know them. Sometimes we don't care to know them. I know the culture in New York City is very much so sometimes like, keep your head down and keep it pushing kind of thing. But, how does that actually disrupt what we're trying to create here tonight? Right? So looking at our own actions and how we like hold each other and, how we listen to and anticipate the needs of the people that we're passing every day, right? I think about one initiative that really sticks out to me is like, when people step up or like communities that I've been a part of have like organized direct responses to when things happen. So like, for example, like when queer and trans folks or like women feel uncomfortable like walking from like the train station from like place to place late at night, or like acts of violences have been happening in the community, gendered violence, people will like have organized and said like, let's actually come up with a system where like we can have people at the train station to pick people up who don't feel safe, right? Or like systems of like collecting bail to get our folks out of jail, right? Like, literally like aunties, calling sisters, calling moms, calling grandmas to collect money to collect bail. Like these are things to me that are like everyday acts of, the way that I've seen my people like stand up and say, you know what, we don't need police. In fact, police literally stand in the way of our day-to-day functions happening. They want to disrupt my trip from like point A to point B, right? Or they want to like disappear my relatives or whatnot. So it's like, important to like also remember that as well, like we're already doing things. We just need to be conscious, yeah.
They also don't really actually even if the police were to stop crime or solve crime or whatever, they actually don't do those things. Even in this city where the budget is insane, we were like in our neighborhood like last weekend there was a shooting that happened and they had like aviation units, they had literally a helicopter, which like is not cheap. And so like anyway, in the end like they actually never actually caught the person who ended up committing this murder. And so it's sort of just like, you know, crime, there's a lot of reasons why crime exists. I don't think that like a police force that actually is just like often coming way after the fact or like aren't like, I don't know what the statistics are, I'm sure someone in this room probably knows it, but like when you look to see sort of like what have they actually solved, it's actually like very little.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I'm thinking about like a couple weeks ago, there was this man in the Bronx who was unfortunately like going through like a really intense mental health crisis.
Yeah.
And his father called 311, didn't call 911, intentionally didn't call the police because he knew that his son like suffered from mental illness and that like he was very afraid that if the police were to come, they would escalate the situation.
Right.
So he called 311, and because 311, whatever, we don't have to talk about 311, but 311 ended up calling the police. And so the police ended up coming and ended up shooting this person multiple times. And so he survived, fortunately, but like, there's also like thinking about alternatives of like when people are in crisis, like how can we be showing up in different ways? How can people who are actually trained to respond to crisis show up? And also
Exactly.
that being like not just an expert, like us, like each other being able to know how to respond to mental health crisis, for example, could be one thing, but
And like redistributing those skills.
exactly, like
So,
not
like,
having
yeah.
to call a special, like you know, I actually so
Yeah, like what if like our social workers, like, you know, in community, like ran a training on how to respond to crisis, which that does happen,
it does happen,
right? And or like mental health counselors, or like, you know, like a first aid rapid response kind of situation, which definitely has been like in the works for years. Like that kind of organizing does happen, but you bring up a really great point, Basma, like especially when we look at like, you know, like police are in a lot of ways useless, you know, for the things that like we're told they're gonna do for us, like serve and protect or whatever, you know. We even think about like the history of police, they literally were created to like protect private property, like rich people. And, you know, that has evolved, and, you know, they also have roots as slave catchers. And so like, you know, very much so. I always think of, do y'all know that song by KRS-One, Sound of the Police?
Yeah.
That song will teach you a lot. Listen to that song, it'll teach you all about the history and the connections between police, past, present, and future. Like, he really did something when he made that song. So, you know, this is not our last time holding this space and having this conversation. This is an ongoing conversation. And we are, you know, I also use the term village. We are village. We are each other's community. So, like, I hope that this will also prompt us to depend on and think of one another a little bit more as we're also navigating our lives and navigating these questions in the future. And of course, come through to the next iftar next year, inshallah, and the other events that we're going to be holding throughout this year. But yeah, thank you so much for coming out to this iftar for the people. And I'm over here if you have any questions about Freedom to Thrive or about any of the work, any of the things that went into pulling this off.
Thank you.